So the goal of our healing and wellness platform is to center women of color advocates, activists, and survivor health, healing, and leadership sustainability in the broader social justice movements of anti-racism, anti-violence, and gender equity. And this work is actually made possible by the National Football League. So we definitely want to thank them for making this conversation possible. And at the end, I'll talk about our fact sheets that are coming up and all of that. So we have lots of great information coming down the pike, again, sponsored with the help of the National Football League. And so the goal of this quarterly podcast is to talk with national healing and wellness experts, survivors of violence, domestic violence, and sexual assault advocates. And we really want to talk about the ways that they're tending to their emotional, spiritual, and physical needs, and to share emerging and non-traditional strategies for achieving healing and wholeness in our lives and in our work. So again, this is our second installment. And so my co-host is the wonderful Becky Misaki. So she is the co-host on this podcast, but she is also my, I don't even know what to say, co-maestra, I don't know, troublemaker, maybe, good trouble, co-conspirator around this healing and wellness conversation and around this work. And so, you know, for those of you who don't know, Becky co-founded one of the first violence against women programs in the nation that could meet the language and cultural needs of Asian survivors of domestic violence and trafficking, Asian Women's Center in San Francisco, and served as the founding executive director for over 21 years. Becky has extensive experience providing multilingual, multicultural services to domestic violence and trafficking survivors and their children. She's also a master of creating innovative programming, preventing community building, and she's just a fantastic person, and especially when it comes to this healing and wellness conversation. So Becky, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. And my co-conspirator co-host, Radical Self-Care, is Zoe Showers. And it's just so wonderful because actually Zoe has brought her whole person into so many different ways. So she actually is national public radio, of course, many speaking engagements and to big crowds as well as small. And then really her core passion has always been to center the voices and the leadership and the wellness of those who have been silenced and often can't speak, or when they do speak are not heard and are not seen. And so that's why it's especially so meaningful to do this together with her. And yes, that is Zoe. Thank you so much. So much more to say about Zoe Flowers, but we will move on to also introducing our special, am I getting ahead?
Yes.
Special guest. Okay, first, let's do the wellness exercise.
Yeah, I figured
Go ahead, Zoe.
To do like just a quick little breathing, and I need it. Like I said, I just got in from the airport, and so I definitely need a moment to ground as we jump into this conversation. So I would just invite everyone that's on the call to sort of wherever you are, unless you're in a car, to just sit firmly with your back pressed against the chair. Your feet are able to touch the ground. Let them do that. If you want to just be as firm, almost as square as possible, let your top lid fall down towards your bottom lids if you feel comfortable. If you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes completely, you can just leave a little slit and maybe send the energy or the chi, as we say, down to the ground. And I'm going to just invite you to take a deep breath in through your nose. holding it for a moment and releasing it through your mouth, letting your shoulders relax. And maybe letting your hands fall down to your thighs. Taking another deep breath in through your nose. And release the air out through your mouth. Maybe settling even further into your chair. Taking a last inhalation in through your nose. And just making a commitment to yourself as you hold in that breath to be fully present in this moment. Allow yourself time to just be present in this conversation. And exhale out. Let this be your time to just take in information. So often we're giving so much, we're outpouring so much. Let this be your time to receive. Let's just take another deep breath in. And this time, as we take that deep breath in, we're going to take in the yellow, the color of summer, the color yellow. So breathe in through your nose and see if you can let that color yellow fill up your entire head. See if you can let it cover your entire face. And as you exhale, just exhale anything that no longer serves you. So you can be present in this moment with your colleagues. Thank you. And when you're ready, and only when you're ready, open your eyes slowly. Maybe wiggle your toes, maybe wiggle your fingers. And then we are going to turn it over to Yolanda. So I met Yolanda years and years and years ago when I was working for the Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Could somebody put themselves on mute? There's somebody that's on mute. There's somebody that's not on mute.
Do you close the door open?
So, so Yolanda and I met years and years ago, and we've had just several long conversations together, and she's always just been a phenomenal meditator.
We can let her know that you came by and dropped something off.
So Yolanda is also a professional speaker. She's a trainer herself. She's a professor. She has 20 years of experience speaking, training.
Are you on us right now?
No, I'm just doing a webinar. And
let me recommend that you just go ahead and mute everybody and then unmute who needs to speak.
There's somebody on here.
Oh, there's avocado.
What's up with sauce?
So can you do that?
No.
You got it.
Oh, that's good.
I don't really know how to explain it.
There's actually somebody on here that can't.
So I see that Becky,
Yeah.
mine is not muted.
I just sent Becky a private message. So Becky, do you think you could put yourself on mute that way? Thank you. Thank you. She did that. Great.
Thank you so much. Okay, wonderful. So Yolanda began her professional career working at The Haven, a shelter for battered women in Valdosta, Georgia, where she served as a continuing care coordinator. So again, I'm going to turn it over to Yolanda now so she can talk with us about radical self-care and what it means to her. Yolanda, you might be on mute now.
Okay. I'm unmuted. Hello, everybody. No, I absolutely love technology, and it's greatest gift and challenge sometimes. So, that's kind of a broad question. I don't know how much you want me to say right now, except that when I started doing the research after you asked me to kind of do something on radical self-care, the first thing I saw was this quote by Angela Davis, where she said that radical means grasping at the root. And so I think for me, one of the most powerful things about my own personal journey is having done some real, I don't want to get so straight into EMDR, but just really doing a lot of investment in healing work. And so I think that for those of us, and not everybody, I listened to your previous podcast not all of us need to do that kind of work, but some of us do. And so if the root is trauma, then we need to address the trauma. If the root is just, I don't know, kind of addiction to negativity, then we need to get to the root of that. And if the root is our inability to be in healthy relationships, then we need to get to the root of that. What is at the basis? In the article I wrote, I talked a little bit about having gone to Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous, and how I heard this woman say, you know, alcohol is but a symptom of your disease. And I thought, my goodness, because if you are either an alcoholic or know an alcoholic, that's a pretty extraordinary symptom. And so if you have an addiction, it seems like if you get rid of that addiction, then you're good. But sometimes getting, you know, away from the drugs or the person is just the beginning of our journey. That the real root is trauma, loneliness, low self-esteem. So those are the real issues for many of us. And so a lot of what I talked about in the article and on this slide is just about how we can begin to transform after we accept that there's something really serious going on. How can we begin to transform our lives, body, mind, and spirit? So that's a little bit of what I like to hit on. And of course, I would love to have any questions about that to guide the discussion. Or you can do the PowerPoint and I'll talk about those.
In this question of transformation, it's something that I like to talk about a lot as well. And so what do you think are some of the things that get in the way of getting to the root or getting to that transformation?
You know, Zoe, that's funny because I think for a lot of us, one of the biggest barriers is thinking we already have done the work. And so this is this idea of the onion. It's like you may have done some work, and the worst thing for those of us who do this work is you realize I've done the work, so what's this? I need to do more work, right? It's not an event, it's a process. So the other thing is we have so much access to data that sometimes we think that to read and understand means to live, and that's not true. To live is to live, right? It's almost like reading about meditation and understand the meditation process and thinking now you're a meditator. In order to be a meditator, you have to sit in meditation as a practice, not as a vacation or this fun thing you do monthly. It's a practice like bathing the body. So I think one of the biggest barriers is our mental state. We think we know because we heard about it. We think we know because we understand it, when knowing is practicing, in my opinion. All right. Of course, there's other barriers, like some people don't have access to the money that they need to get good therapy. So that's one of the things we talk about. I feel very fortunate, although I am not monetarily rich, I am really rich spiritually. So a lot of groovy things happen to me because of my contact with whatever you want to call God. So sometimes people don't really have access to good therapy. And that is a barrier, right? Or even the social resources of it being okay for you to get help. That can definitely be a barrier. I think the primary barrier, though, is kind of psychological, mental, getting past the fact that we really do need to continue to work and heal.
So, Becky, please feel free to jump in at any point. I would love for you to just back up a little bit and talk about sort of what brought you to sort of these realizations or these points.
So yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Just tell
really?
us a little bit about your own journey.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So, I'm old now, so there's a lot, but let me just say kind of the big stuff. I was actually thinking about it this morning. You know, I was a victim of rape, and we didn't call it rape because it was statutory rape. I slept with quite a few men when I was a young girl. And because I was willing, I never thought of it as rape. And I think this is an important story because when healing happens, one thing you once saw as unfortunate can become trauma once you go into that deep place of, you know, because no trauma is isolated. So what begins to happen is it's because of my loneliness and the lack of care of those people who were taking care of me, that those people had access to me. And all of that energy together, as I reprocessed it, became a trauma for me. And so I was raised in South Georgia, and my parents were together when I was born, all three of us. There are three of us. And as I said, some of my early childhood trauma, but I think the beatings, and that's kind of, I'm a classic Black, so Southern. So, you know, in the classic Black community, spare the rod, spoil the child. Yeah. But the rod spoiled the child. Yeah. I was beaten. And that was really my first trauma, beaten and abandoned emotionally. And I feel like when you beat your children, that's a form of physical abandonment. And so my father was my first abuser. He abused my mother, but he also abused myself. And I also witnessed him beating my stepmother. And so I was just exposed to a lot of violence as a young person. And so, I mean, I don't want to take up too much time talking about all the horrible things that have happened to me, but I'll just say that a lot has happened. And so when I found drugs in my teens, what a relief, huh? Mm-hmm. What a relief to have something to numb the pain. And as I say in the article, the guest became the master. Huh. Right? But it is through, however, and there's so much I can say, but one of the reasons why I love the 12 steps is because, you know, the exposure to a God as I understood God, because I had some religious abuse. A couple of my perpetrators were actually ministers. Yeah. Right? And so that got all confusing. I'm a little bit better at religion now, but after I got clean, I started really looking at, hey, there's more. There is more here. I started meditating about 20 years ago and realized there was even more than I thought, you know, so this is like more and more and more. The onion idea is complicated because you get those layers off and you do feel good. Yes. The deeper you peel, the more joy you release. You feel me? Yeah. So it is hard, yes, but it's so rewarding. Some of your listeners may be Christian and they may have heard this song, The Joy That Floods My Soul from Day to Day. From day to day. So meditation is not a visitation, but nor is the joy. The joy is deep rooted. Right. And we have access to that. I have access to that because of all the weeping and wailing. Yes. And sometimes you have to weep and wail to heal.
Yes. And you've said so much that I'm just like, I'm so glad we're recording. But one of the things that, you know, that I hear is, and when you were talking about sort of the corporal punishment, the spankings.
Yeah.
And my sister and I were just talking about this a couple of weeks ago. It's like also the sort of schizophrenic nature of, oh, do you want me to give you something to cry for? Or
thank you.
Then you're not cry about it. So there's all of these like layers that are put on our little brains that we can process. As we get older, and there's not a lot of space to process because everybody has had that shared experience of trauma. You know, the comedians make jokes about it like it's, you know. So there's really, you have to really do the hard work to grow, to have the space. So I'm curious about how you created the space for yourself, because so many of us don't have the time, the mental space, the physical space to do this introspection.
How I create the space for myself. You know, especially lately, a lot of these old songs, I noticed that you do a little bit of tarot, and one of my really good friends, she tuned in, I guess you could say she's my girlfriend, gave me these tarot cards, and they're all in nature. You know, they're so nature bound. And so what I noticed about me as a little girl was that I was drawn to trees, right? So I feel like if anybody has any inclination toward nature, go often. There is, you know, we know that we exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide with nature. And there's something about that that's really calming. And so for me, it became very natural for me to be alone in the woods. And sometimes you don't have woods. Sometimes you need to go in your backyard and just sit by the tree that's out there, right? You don't have to go all the way to the woods like I like to do. And so I have a practice of being outside. Outside is not something that accidentally happens. I make it my business to go outside and let nature teach me what it means to be with nature, right? You know, and so between my outside practice and my meditation practice, and I actually started meditating because I saw some people meditating on TV, and it was just like, I think I need that. I don't know what happens when that is happening, but I really think I need that. And so I found a group in town where I lived. I was actually in Tallahassee, and I joined a Sangha. I participated in that Sangha for 10 years. And we got together and sat around in the circle, and we didn't chat. You know, it wasn't an intellectual gathering. We sat in silence. We walked in silence. We sat in silence. We ate and talked a little bit, and then we sat in silence. And the things, I love this so much. Steal away. Be still and know. Still waters run deep. So in the stillness, and that's the thing that is free, that's so hard to come to. In the stillness, it's like there is a knowing in all human consciousness that rises. Now, if something comes up, let's say you sit for 30 minutes and something come up, it's like, ouch, you might want to run. Don't run. Stay with it, right? If you need help, get somebody to stay with it with you, because it is through walking through that thing you just felt, this pain, that your release comes. It is going through that you release it. Many years ago, a woman had a group of us in this healing around. It was called what is it? Oh, I can't think of the name of it, but it was about healing from racism. And she had this person on the board with a lot of dots. And she said, the more you heal, the more you free your brilliance. The more you heal, the more, I'm like, that's so cool. But for me, I would say the more I heal, the more I free my joy. The more I heal, the more I free my joy.
So profound. So many gems that you're giving us. Thank you. You know, just these things that any of us could do is like notice nature.
Look at that flower you got going there, girl.
Yes, that's why I actually picked these in our backyard. And now, so I really, in fact, that's funny too, is that I wanted to have my Zoom in the backyard, in my backyard. The flowers are blooming and it's nice. I live in Oakland, California, but technically I think I was like not quite figuring out how to do that well. I brought some flowers in, and yes, it's so true for us to notice. Like I think my mom now actually is in dementia. She's 82, which is I'm so blessed about. But when I walk with her, I notice that we're just walking and she's enjoying that. And she'll say, wow, that tree got bigger. And it's something like I'm not even noticing because I'm thinking about, okay, you know, my work, or oh, next I'm going to be doing this or that. I'm just taking a little walk with mom. And then I'm like, oh, yes, like be in the present moment. Look, it did grow, you know, it is something. We are in that, that place. And I feel like little kids do that too, right? They notice like, oh, look at the flower or the grass, or, you know, those kinds of things. So that is something I think all of us who on this call who've joined, I just really want to honor, and I know we're doing important, meaningful work, and we need to do our radical self-care, right? Be in nature, give us our breathing space, those kinds of things. Yeah, so thank you, Yolanda. That's
It's something. One of the things about nature is that's something that you can give to your clients too. I mean, one of the guys that I follow now, Sadhguru, who is an Indian yogi, he talks about eat your lunch by a tree if you can. You know, you go to a park, pull up by a tree and eat your lunch. No more talk. Just be with your food. Just be with the food and see what that feels like. I can tell you what it feels like, but you should do it and see what it feels like.
Yeah, that's so important too. I feel like a common habit that we have that we don't think about is like, okay, and I do this, is like, okay, I'm just going to eat lunch. Well, in fact, I even thought about this during this podcast. I'm in the West Coast, so it's, you know, 11:30. I was like, okay, I'll just eat I'll put a little bowl here and eat some when I'm not talking or whatever. And I thought, you know, we're always multitasking. But what a beautiful thing that I can just sit, enjoy, and be mindful about food and have a little space, or even have a little lunch and chat with a friend or our coworker, those kinds of things. Yeah. It's a good reminder for all of us.
Absolutely. So I want to just invite anybody, if anyone has any questions, any comments at this point. We're about 30 minutes into the conversation. We have a lot more to talk about with Yolanda, but I just want to give folks just a second to see if you have any, you know, any thoughts, any aha moments that have surfaced. And you can either put them in the chat or you can unmute yourself, or I think I can unmute you.
And I can say some more about food.
Yeah, folks probably just want to hear more from you. So I'm going to go on to this next slide.
Mind, body, spirit. Yeah.
So pretty. I was like, my slides are so dry compared to yours.
Well, I think that's a question. It showed up for me. Am I supposed to address that question?
The mind, body, spirit?
No, there was a chat. There was a.
Oh, is there a question in the chat that came up?
Yeah.
Oh, hold on. I have to change my my view so I can actually see it. Hold on. Oh, perfect. Okay, so let's see. Great. Do you have any tips on how to start disciplining ourselves to start taking care of ourselves in a radical way?
In a radical way, huh? Yeah, you know, I would always start with silence. You know, anytime I do a training, there's a point at which I guide the audience through a meditation, very much like what you did, Zoe. Just kind of, the only difference may be just kind of tightening and relaxing. But when people come out of that, they're like, like, I didn't know that could happen with just being in my body, right? And so, but of course it can, right? And so this, you know, even if you're in your living room, turn off everything and just see what it's like to be in silence. just be quiet. And so if you want a doorway into that, you could go on if you have a porch, you sit on the back porch and you set your phone timer and say, you know what, I'm going to sit inside. I'm not even going to try to meditate. I'm just going to sit in silence for 5 minutes every day for a week. That's an easy thing to do. The other thing that I like is that thing about what you eat, because I'm really learning how to manage my food. So part of what I do is a thing called intermittent fasting. And people have heard about that. I think a lot of people do intermittent fasting to lose weight. And you can't really see, but I'm really curvy, so I'm not really using it for that. I like what it does to me mentally. I mean, my meditations are so different when I'm fasting. And so you might not want to fast. What I do is I'll drink a smoothie and then I won't eat anything else until the next day. You might just want to skip a meal so that during the time when the stomach is most empty, and you would have to be in your body. A lot of us aren't in the body. All right. You have to be in your body to go, oh, I'm feeling hungry, and be with that experience. Just be quiet with the experience of just being hungry. That's something you just skip a meal, not to stress the body out by saying, I'm going to starve so I can lose 80 pounds in 2 weeks. The body doesn't want to do that. It is going to turn on you, and it should. That doesn't make sense. But to just slowly get into what is happening with me in food, what is happening in my mind. You cannot transform. There's the Christian scripture, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. You can't renew your mind until you know what's going on. You got to find out what's going on in your mind. And that's what meditation and sitting in silence does. You start seeing your mind. You're like, girl, you don't like nobody, Yolanda. What is that about? How can we come to start loving people? But you can't really address that until you get a sense of what's going on in your mind.
And do you feel that a lot of people that come to me that actually cannot get silent because of dissociative disorder, because of things that have happened to them, trauma, etc. And so I've had people actually get very uncomfortable when I have them be silent, and they do it, right, because people want to like please the teacher or whatever. And afterwards they're like, whoa, that was really hard for me, or that was really challenging. So what would you, and a lot of people, their mind starts racing, and so silence is very threatening to some people. So what would you say? I know you said work through it, but would you suggest that they work with somebody on that? What would you suggest to people who just say they can't do the silent thing? So 2 things. The first thing is, let's deal with kind of like what everybody has to deal with, which is what a lot of Buddhists or meditators call drunken monkey mind, right? Right? So the mind is constantly churning. And so if we anticipate that during meditation there will be no thinking, don't try to not think. And so meditation is more like the ocean. On the surface, there's these waves, and the more you sit, things slow down. Right. And so the more you sit, you know when you've reached that kind of ground of your own consciousness, like, it usually takes about 10 or 15 minutes. And then you just really get to a place you don't want to come out of it because of that, the beauty of stillness. I could talk to you about this all day, but you would need to start a practice to get into it. And so while I was in Shambhala is the place I went to, and most of the people in Shambhala were Buddhist. I'm not anything. I'm just a citizen of the universe. But a lot of them were Buddhist, and I thought that was cool. But in Shambhala, people would come in for a weekend meditation. And that's not easy. If you go from nothing to this weekend, it is challenging. And sometimes people would cry. But if a human being is at a place where they sit for 10 minutes and stuff is just coming up, that's, to me, like unbearable. I feel like that is the universe's way of saying this is an emergency situation. Because the psyche is such that there's so many things, so many
so much neuronal kind of networking to protect us. And if you're not protected like that, that means it's time, baby. It's time for delivery. Because people sit for years and never could touch stuff, right? If you sit for 10 minutes and something comes up, then I think that person and the community or that one other person needs to get into some trauma therapy. And I've been, as hard as it was for me, I've been through EMDR 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if people are interested, I'm happy to talk about that. And if they're not, I'm happy not to.
Well, let's see here. We'll
Yeah.
talk on some more, and maybe we'll end up at EMDR.
Okay.
Great practice. Okay, so the human body. You want to chat a little bit about that?
So as we go down, what I think, I don't know if you can hit.
Yeah, I can.
Because I think we talked a lot about that. And one of the things in this particular slide you see, I think this is there are many pictures of Buddha, but I think it's I love, we skipped Buddha, but I like this. That came from another Christian scripture. The body is a temple.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just really, for me, it's like a mindset. How do you feel about your body? I was watching a video with Sadhguru a couple of days ago, and these people were he was giving them all this good data, and they're like, how long? And he's like, we're talking about your being. What are you willing to give to be well, to be whole? It is going to take time. So to see the body as this temple that you're almost bowing down, there's so many miraculous things happening in the body. And basically what we have to do is exercise, eat right, have good friends, and do whatever healing work comes up for us. But we're treating it like something sacred. As a matter of fact, the body is much more precious than any temple. Look at the regenerative properties that we have, right? So we cannot build anything to begin to match the human body. So I already talked about fasting and food. Only other thing I'll say about food, the best food for the human body is the food that comes from the earth. The closer to the earth, the better it is for you, right? And so we eat organic because we don't want the body to have to process all of those chemicals. So if you can afford organic, that's good. But if you can't get organic, get fresh. If you can't get fresh, get frozen. And if you must do can, then do. Right? But we are made of food, and food is important. Mm-hmm. Food is absolutely important.
Absolutely. I think your next slide is food, so we'll probably just skip over that, right?
Yeah. Look at that. Look at that. That's it. That's it, right? It's so fresh, you can't help it, right? Look at that. It's so fresh. And, I always say to people, I'm not against pork chop at all. Eat you a fried pork chop and just sit with it, and then eat you a salad the next day, and then sit with it and see what the body says about those different things that you eat.
And I feel like that in itself can be a meditation. I mean, there are things that I eat where I feel like I can feel my cells just jumping, being like, thank you for those words, whatever, And so that in itself also can be a meditation. Like you're saying, just sit and, again, just slow down. Just slow down. Keying into your breath, keying into your, the body is always making some kind of cute movement. Even that can be a meditation, right? Paying attention, what are my ears doing right now? Even sometimes driving, I just intently concentrate on, wow, how do my hands feel around the steering wheel right now? Like, how does it feel in this seat? What's the pressure on my feet as I hit the brakes? Like all these things to just, be aware. And that is a great sort of, introduction to coming off of autopilot. I remember I had a student years ago, and I would say, when you go to the grocery store, just pay attention to how your body feels when you walk into the store. Like, feel what the energy feels like in the store, right? It doesn't have to be like this deep thing that causes $30 for you to do. You know, it's being aware of yourself.
That's the beauty of being human, right? We are aware that we're aware.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Becky, did you want to chime in?
Yes. I was looking on the chat, and Alma, thank you. She was saying, Yolanda, you're making me hungry.
What did she say?
And I was just gonna, actually, that made me say that too. I was like, yes, me too. And I was just thinking, but this time I'm gonna have some mindful lunch. Like, I think about, when I used to, this is probably a familiar story to many of you. Like, okay, I was working at the shelter, at Asian Women's Shelter, dealing with a lot of, very urgent matters. Well, one thing though is that we really centered food. And so we had a great kitchen. We bought any kinds of the food that people wanted to cook and share. And so it was just wonderful, right? The women, the residents. For myself, I would often just be busy, with paperwork or meetings or that kind of stuff, and not join them for a meal. And I realized, what is that saying? And so then I would be conscious to join them, not every meal, but, at a routine, create a routine where at least I'm showing up or being with them, enjoying eating together or cooking together. And what I realized what motivated me to do it was just to be more present with my whole self at the shelter, but it really helped me and my own nutrition and energy and my pace and oh yes. So I feel like that is also what we mean by radical self-care, is yes, we're doing radical deep work. And I love that you opened us up with a quote from Angela Davis, because she's known as our Shiro. We still continue to look up to her in her radical social justice work and bold work. And yet what she's saying is just, it's in the roots, and just be present, care, all of that. And I noticed that in Angela too, because, whenever you see her, she always has time for you, question, wherever she is.
That's a great compliment.
Yeah.
I want to say something about food too, and at the root, because sometimes we want to lose weight. It's going back to me in addiction. You want to lose weight and you think that food is the real issue, but there's another root cause, right?
Yep.
So many of us who are survivors may be eating our pain.
Absolutely.
Right? And so here we have this thing that tastes good, feels good, that won't leave us, won't hurt us, right? And then it can actually hurt the body though, right? If you don't eat the right things and you eat too much of it, then the body starts breaking down. So what is the real root of what's going on with me and eating versus all of these different diets? What is my relationship with food? How am I processing food? What is eating me? And I think that all of us have to ask the question, what's going on with me and what I'm putting in my body? We are made of food.
Yes. And I think, for all of the folks that are conference planning that are on this call, I implore you to stop doing your survivor stories during lunch. This became very clear to me at the previous place where I was working, and we used to do conferences all the time. And I noticed during one particular survivor story that people were just shoving the food, And because I wasn't in the mix, I was able to be the observer. And I was like, whoa, people are straight eating their feelings. People are traumatized from the survivor story, and they are legit. I don't want to, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. So again, we have to even think about those of us that are doing the work, how we're continuing these practices, right? And do we need to be, because everything is energy. So do we need to compare. So it's the worst experience of their life while eating. I would say no. Okay. So Alma says, yes, earthy food is very important for our minds and bodies, and it has a powerful bonding effect when shared with others. So did you want to say anything else on food, or did you want to move forward?
We can move forward. Let's go. Let's do it.
All right.
Well, also, maybe do we have a
That's kind of a food one too.
to hear from others? Thank you, Alma. How about any of the others of you on this call?
Okay.
All right.
So this next slide is just about some of the benefits of intermittent fasting. It's a lot of you have already started doing intermittent fasting, and this idea of having a break from digestion, improve blood pressure, boost brain functioning. So that might be some of why I feel a different feeling when I'm meditating and I'm fasting, right? And then, of course, if you're not eating, you're not gaining weight. I try to do intermittent fasting Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I do notice when I'm hanging out with my girlfriend, I don't do that. We eat a lot. So but when I'm home and it's just me, I just, I don't eat. And it's like meditating. You kind of get used to that feeling. There's another thing about fasting that I like. When you first start fasting and you hear your body say, I want to eat, and you go, baby, I know you do, but we're good, and you drink water instead, you can't think your way through it. You have to live your way through it. Look, I'm not my body. I'm not my mind. There's something, I guess you could call it spirit, Yahweh, or whatever. I'm that stuff, and we're not eating. Until tomorrow morning. Okay, boo? Right? That's something about who is in charge of the being.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
To live that, not talk about it, but live it. And talk about it, but definitely live it.
Yeah. Do you want to talk at all about who's in charge of the being? Because that might be a concept that folks are not.
Well, what to me, it's like you have your mind, you have your body. We hadn't talked about spirit, but what is spirit? I don't know. But one of the things that happened to me during my meditation practice, one of the first things I came to was I'm breathing, because the way I was taught to meditate, you focus on the breath coming in and out, right? So you're sitting, you're breathing in, breathing out. And so I had this, it seems so simplistic, but I had this moment where I was like, I'm breathing and I'm not doing it. What in the world is holding me together? And having been religious, of course, you go God or Jesus or Allah or whatever. But for me, it was more of a question mark than an answer. And so for me, in my own spiritual practice now, people talk about the Trinity. I am mind, body, spirit. All of them are connected, and a lot of it is not in my control. I can't tell you what God is, but I can tell you I'm a lot of it, right? So when I say we're going to feel this pain in our belly and we're going to eat in the morning and drink water, then whatever will is or desire is that is beyond the body and what I'm thinking, then that's it. That's another thing. People like to ask me, what do you mean by spirituality? And I say, what do you mean by being in love? You got to fall in love, baby. I can talk to you all day about being in love, but you got to risk the vulnerability of falling in love. And one way to have a relationship with God or the universe or Mother Nature is to sit and communicate with the unknown and the unknowable. It is there. We don't have answers for everything like that. I don't. I do know if I go into the woods and I go, oh my goodness, this is scary for me, help me. All of a sudden these answers seem to come up. Isn't that interesting? So you ask, what should people do? I would say, sit down and say to whatever you believe is maintaining your breath, help me. I dare you. to start a practice of saying, help me. I don't really know what to do. Help me. I want healing, but I'm scared. Help me. I want to let go and love somebody, but I'm scared. Help me. And keep your eye out. Kay, as my girlfriend said, Kay.
So Becky, do you want to chime in?
Becky.
I know. Oh, you're making me think of so many things, and I do really want to hear from the rest of the participants in this. So please feel free to speak up or, you know, join the conversation. But I guess one thing about the faith, you know, I am born and raised Buddhist, and but here in California, that it's now, and then also talk about age. I am 61, so I feel like I am in the elder range of our work. I've been doing this forever, but in that time, I'm still learning, right? I just realized and learned that some of these things were a Buddhist practice and a breathing practice. For example, the calligraphy, like here, I'm even going to show you here. I'm here in my house. I hope I don't drop this. But okay, so see, like this over here. You probably have seen these kinds of things, right?
Yes,
so
yes, I have a lot.
Yes, that kind. And I have all the tools and ingredients because my aunties and grandma, they thought, oh, you're a good artist. And then so they gave me the original traditional Japanese tools. Like I have these, they call sumi brush, and the ink, the black ink, and like doing that. But here, growing up in the U.S. and especially during an era and time which minimizes us or goes after the Japanese incarceration, like they didn't want me to do Japanese things. So I never really learned the deeper meaning until last year or something is, you know what, the brush is a meditation. It's not just like, well, it's part of that. You make beautiful pictures or, do a letter or those kinds of things. But actually, when you use the brush, it's a meditation, you use the brush, breathe in, breathe out.
Okay, girl.
Yes, and I just am finding that part. So then the way Angela Davis is saying, the roots, I'm like, okay, yes, the roots, because I didn't, I was, I didn't think deeper or know deeper, just the whole process. And in fact, I would even see some, shodo masters, the ones doing it, do that. But without that understanding, I just thought, oh yeah, they're being dramatic, or that's how they're breathing. But it really is meditation. So I think
I love that. As a matter of fact, that reminds me of, I've been telling some of my friends that even though I'm not a Christian, a lot of the old spirituals have been visiting me lately. We're talking about when you sit. I don't know if any of your listeners have ever heard, I need thee, oh, I need thee. Just humming it. Every hour. So that old spiritual. One of my girlfriends, she keeps trying to get that sound. I would be in the classroom sometimes and I would say, raise your hand if you ever heard this. When you sit and you decided that I'm going to take this 15 minutes for me and nature or God or whatever your ancestry is, I feel like my ancestors are coming to me in songs like that. I need thee, oh, I need you. I need thee. Whether I'm Christian or not, I need whatever that thing is. And so I can hum it Sometimes I stand up and stump it out. As a matter of fact, I had this vision this morning, Zoe. I was in meditation and I was thinking about all of, I was thinking about my last trauma experience. And I actually had this vision of myself, like, the Christians talk about being born again. I had this vision of myself in an egg. And through this process of reprocessing, I broke out. But it wasn't just that. There were women singing on the outside,
Yes.
honey, like Beloved.
Yes.
Right? Singing on the outside, like, come on. And I just teared up. I'm just breaking through. Right? Not on my own, but not without me.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yes.
So there's a couple of comments in the chat. So I want to read the comments, but I also want to say that, so I'm here in Atlanta and they do whole, there's ladies doing whole rebirthing ceremonies. Right here in the ATL, honey, where you will get in somebody's living room and you are literally like going through a tunnel. All the things you're talking about, they're actually doing. They've got instruments, they've got all these things. And so people, they've been doing that for a while. So they're actually rebirthing themselves. Yeah. So that's interesting that you saw that. So let's see what Paula has to say. So Paula says, so I work in an organization that does a lot of work with immigrants and advocacy, and I find myself struggling to do radical self-care, let alone self-care, especially around this president and his bullying techniques that have us just jumping at every possible grade, etc. Do you have any suggestions for starting on this track, especially in a place of work that has a constant crisis or potential for crisis?
I guess that's to me, huh?
I mean, listen, you got to answer it. So if you don't, I do.
Well,
I think.
Yolanda, go first.
Yeah, go ahead, Yolanda.
Well, I don't know if a person is talking about being like in a shelter or at a coalition, but to me, it would be really radical and very helpful if before any meetings, I was actually thinking about talking to my girlfriend about this. Whenever we get ready to talk about something serious, why don't we just sit for like 3 minutes in silence? Because the ego always wants to win the argument. Right? And there's something about silence that allows things to settle. And this desire that we have for goodwill can rise up, right? I think that, I know you say people hate silence. I really think we need to take a moment sometimes. Last time in your last podcast, Becky was doing, I don't know if you call it quick gong, where you just kind of raise your hands up, in breath, put your hand. Maybe we can agree to do that. But I think there needs to be a conversation about, let's bring our brightest, best, most caring self into this conversation. If that means we need to walk outside, create a circle where we can walk outside around this tree, if we need to create some kind of silence. But what we really need is to kind of give the ego, acknowledge there's ego that wants to have the room, and decide we're not going to do that. That we want to bring as much sisterly and brotherly love into the room as humanly possible. And we all get to have some say-so in how that happens, but that needs to happen. Because there are people who are really being there. We think we're in the trenches. What about the woman who is actually being battered right now? And so we have to commit to our care, because we can't transmit what we don't have. We have to have it to send it out.
Come on.
Yes, I want to add to that. Yes. And I think that it is natural that because we're doing that work. So Paula, thank you for raising that, because right now for immigrant and advocacy, for example, the kids in need of defense, they were so thoughtful to reach out to me and say, you know what, we need some help with internal trauma-informed care, because they're giving so much help and support to kids and their families in trauma. And how are they enduring that, right? And even for me to help them, I was getting like triple vicarious trauma. I mean, just thinking about, what they're going through, you all on the front lines, as well as then, of course, those kids and families right there that are enduring or experiencing this. So it just brought up a lot about my own past and my ancestors' generations, and like what we have and what we're going forward. So first of all, I think it's okay, and it's actually the first thing is to name the problem, that these things are happening and our own. So yes, we need, I guess what we mean by radical self-care is that it is a bold move for us to give ourselves care. And I think a lot of times we think, oh, we don't have enough time, it's so selfish, all those things. But like you said, Yolanda, it's not selfish. It's really the way that we are enduring for the long haul, and that we are modeling, we are practicing, we are being our best selves. Yeah, so give yourself that space. It's really important, and it's not extra or luxury. It's just really something to do.
And the only couple of things that I would add is, so I think for me, the question about radical, so I think it's radical to look at your immediate circumstances, your relationships, etc., and see, are you bonding over trauma? We do a lot of trauma that we don't talk about in this work, right? We get into, we go into a lot of rooms and we share a lot of trauma, and that's how we bond. So I would challenge all of us to look at the quality of our relationships and what are we bonding over. That's one thing. And how can we begin to change the nature of our relationships to other people, also to ourselves. I will also offer that you look to see what were your healing practices. Do you have healing practices that came down from your lineage? That you can actually bring into the workplace. I brought crystals into the workplace, and people just wanted in my office. I've brought cards to the workplace. I've been known to take some salt water and sprinkle the four corners in the workplace. I brought mirrors when I really was in toxic work organizations, and I put a mirror right above my door to deflect the energy away. So, sometimes you have to also do things to trick your brain, and so a lot of those things are to trick your brain. If you could come to some organizational practice about how long are you going to go down the rabbit hole with sad conversations and negativity? Like, is it possible to put a cap on it? Can you say, this amount of time, we're going to have this conversation, we're going to pull it apart. But before we do, we're going to breathe. Because you're not going to come up with any good, innovative ideas if your own brain is in fight or flight mode. So first of all, you also have to think about the mechanics of your brain and how your brain is working. And is your brain constantly firing on crisis? And if it is constantly on crisis, then taking some of those meditative practices that Yolanda was talking about, go out and be amongst the trees. If you are in a mostly urban area and trees aren't accessible, just going outside, doing some work with the moon, breathing with the moon. settle that central nervous system, because if you are in fight or flight, those new innovative ideas are not going to come in. You're just going to be stuck like this all the time. And then when somebody cuts in front of you at Whole Foods, you're going to be ready to, lose it. So also I would limit the news, turn off that television if you can. I would limit social media.
I gotta say something.
So that's what I want to say. But yes,
I gotta say something.
Yolanda, yes.
Oh my goodness. So first of all, oh my goodness. It took me years, but I finally got rid of my TV. I didn't just turn it off because I was afraid. I actually turned off. And that's one of the things I want to say about healing, especially addictions. Don't be upset if you go back and then you may have, just like we talk about battery, you may have to do your thing and come back and do your thing and come back. But I gave my TV away. But I want to talk about trauma. And I think this is really important for those of us who lead organizations. I think leadership really needs, because I know most of leadership has the resources to kind of go through. I really have to say something about EMDR because, so first, in case people don't know, EMDR stands for Eye Movement Desensitization Reprocessing. Have you two heard of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I did some the other day.
Okay, then. All right. So, I'm not even gonna kid you. That every time I've done it, it's the most painful thing I've ever done. And one of the things that I realize at this point is that a lot of times when we're traumatized, I love what you said earlier, Zoe, about how we get spankings and our parents will say, hush your mouth. You're like, and just imagine what your cells in your body are doing when you're experiencing pain, but you can't get it out. And so some of us, we might experience a rape and then we go home and we're trying to convince everybody that we're okay. Some of us come home with dirty clothes because we've been violated and then we get a spanking. Some of us just know that nobody really wants to hear it. Right. And so we keep it to ourselves. So reprocessing may be the first time we processed it at all. And a lot of it is painful. It is very, for me, and sometimes I hate telling people this because they're like, well, I'm not going if I got to cry. I have cried and screamed. And the last time I went through EMDR, I was in so much pain. I had the pillow over my face because I didn't want my neighbor to think somebody was beating me up or killing me. Just screaming. But I love this analogy. It's another thing. You see how the Christians, as I get older, all that stuff from my childhood.
Here it comes now. Okay, it's a different conversation than back in the day.
I don't think there's anything wrong with being a Christian. I'm just not religious. But on the third day, boo. Okay, you talk about coming out. And we deserve it. We deserve to be free. And the other thing I'll say about that is in Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous, I told my story all the time. Every time I would get a sponsor, for those of you who are in the 12-step tradition, you tell your sponsor all of your horror stories. That is not the same as the reprocessing that happens in trauma therapy.
Right.
It can release some of that tension. But one of my favorite books on this issue of trauma is called The Body Keeps the Score. It is phenomenal.
Yes.
And one of the things that you learn in The Body Keeps the Score is that our brains, those of us who have PTSD, our brains look different. We need something deep and transformative to address what has happened. A traumatized brain needs real, serious commitment to healing. And everybody is not ready for it. I know that. Some of us have the resources. We don't feel free that we can do it. But for those of us who are able and can, give yourself that gift of deep and profound healing. That is a profound way of getting at the root. Ask the trees, ask the moon, ask God as you understand God to put you in the right place so that you can do the kind of healing that needs to take place. And so when we get at the table, we do have our stories of pain to share, but we have stories of transformation and healing to share too. The joy that floods my soul from day to day will never lose its power. We have stories like that to share while people eat. And we can rejoice in that. And what happens when we're rejoicing and laughing is very different than when we're in pain. The blood vessels open up and blood flows through. When we're like, oh, you hear somebody else's pain, you feel it. You have empathy, you're feeling it with them. And you may actually be causing constriction of your own blood vessels. We need joy to share. Not what we read about joy, but our own experience of joy and transformation. We have to have more of those stories.
That's right.
We have to have more of those stories, especially in this work. And it's particularly, I think, incumbent upon leadership to have a story to share about how I got over.
That's right. That's right.
It's not a luxury. It's a necessity.
That's right. That's right. So I want to read a couple things from the chat. So Elise says, radical self-care can begin with simply paying attention to and attending yourself throughout the day. Take 5 minutes every hour or two to be with self and give self what it needs in that time. I am fasting movies with violence this year. Give my conscience some non-violent space. Somebody else says, let me see if I can scroll back up here. Alice says, your different ideas about food, fasting, and so on made me think about something that I heard a long time ago. It was about sitting, begin a meal or a food, and contemplating the different foods that are on the plate, thinking about plant or animal living in their lifetime and experiencing great and reverent thankfulness. This is what I'm talking about.
I love that. I love that.
That was made by that living being to give me nutrition, comfort, satisfaction, enjoyment of flavors, textures, and aromas.
Yes.
And respect and appreciation and gratitude. And this is what I'm talking about.
That's right.
Thinking about those traditions. What were those stories that you heard? What if you can't find it in your own culture, look to other cultures. Other cultures did this, right? That's why we're all like, oh yeah, of course. Like, I've heard that story before. So look and see what other cultures are doing, have done. What are other traditions of healing? And then try to think about, you know, how you can bring that into your own space. Becky says, thank you, Alice, Elise, and all for sharing simple, doable ways we can start, continue, deepen our radical self-care.
Yeah, I just want to add, I did that in the chat because I didn't want to, you know, I was really listening, and thank you for what you're talking about, Yolanda, but also just a shout out and appreciation of Alice. I mean, with wise women, I mean, that is, yes, that is you, Alice. So thank you for sharing. And of course, also our Elise and everybody that has joined us in the chat, or, you know, with questions or suggestions. We appreciate all of you being on this, and simply just being on this call. I'm sure you have like millions of meetings or paperwork or different kinds of things that you need to do. So just that in itself, that you have, you know, created this space to join us in this Zoom convening and meet with Yolanda, that in itself is radical self-care.
Do you want to say something about movement?
And yoga. I have a yoga practice. I mostly practice yin. I love yin because it's kind of, you know, yin is a practice that's not like a lot of the Pilates. It's kind of you get in a movement and you stay there from 3 to 5 minutes, and it just opens you up. You're usually supposed to focus from like your belly to your thighs. I love yin yoga. So I go to yoga at least once a week, and I try to stretch at home. I have my own, in my house, I have a meditation room, and I have mats and stuff for yoga. So that's how I keep it rolling. So yoga is like, some people will go to yoga. Usually it costs like $10 to go to a session or something, but you can take that on as your own practice. I have not been able to get my own practice. I keep going back to my lady. If you're in Tallahassee, I go to Journeys in Tallahassee. And I just pay because it's so, I just love it. And if you do yoga and then go sit, You know, some people say that yoga was created to get the practitioner ready for meditation. And so the combination of yoga, meditation, I love praise, you know, not in song, but just giving thanks for your body. Dude, we are not holding ourselves together. So yes, I highly recommend a yoga practice for humans.
Thank you.
I don't know what comes after that, but that's a nice picture, isn't it?
Cute.
What do you have? Oh, you're losing energy. Is that you who's lower? Ah, look at that. Huh? Look at that tree. That's an actual picture I took walking in the woods.
I was going to say, that looks like Tallahassee.
I live in a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful city. But I have to tell you that in my little duplex that I stay in, I actually created a path because my landlord has like a lot of straw. I created a path so I can walk barefoot. Because a lot of times when I go to parks, people have their dogs. I don't really want to walk in their dog poop or pee or whatever. So I put this on the side of my house to make sure that I could walk barefoot. And now that I don't have a TV, when people call me, I'll go walk that path and talk. I didn't come up with that. So our guru said, if you, kind of like what you say, if you don't have outdoors, get a bag of dirt and put your feet over it. There is energy in the earth. And so when you're walking barefoot, if you're really tuned in, you feel the difference of walking on the earth. That's right. If you can, just lay down.
That's right.
Just lay down on the earth and let it do, you know, what it do.
Or buy some plants. People say, I'm not a plant person. Become a plant person.
Yeah.
Just buy an easy, durable plant that's hard to kill.
That's right.
And get your hands in that dirt. Even
Oh, yeah. And that's a good point. My house is full of crystals. You mentioned crystals. When people come to my house, they're like, oh, my God, it's so relaxing. Crystals and plants everywhere. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. My daughter calls it a greenhouse. Mm-hmm. But I'm still trying to heal. You know, I'm trying to create an environment where healing is, you know, optimal.
Yes. Tanya says also radical self-care is seeking the form of therapy you need with the right person, with the right specialty and expertise to address your trauma and seeking that specific support. Hypnotherapy work with a Black woman specializing in child sexual assault has saved my life.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, that's the other thing. I mean, I went through EMDR. We will be guided. Different people like different things. And so I can't really speak to a therapy I haven't had, but I'm open. I may need it again.
Mm-hmm. So we have about 10 more minutes, 9 minutes to go. So I want folks, if you have any other comments, to put them in the chat or unmute yourself and bring them in the room before Yolanda talks about how we can get in touch with her. And the work that you do, actually, with folks. We'd love to talk about that, too. So we're going to switch slides here because I feel like we got trauma covered.
We got trauma covered. We're done with that.
Trauma covered. Okay, so do you want to show your work? What do you do with folks?
So I am a professional speaker. So people hire me to do speeches at conferences. I usually speak on this kind of thing, self-care and valuing diversity. It's strange that hadn't even come up, but I do a lot on diversity in the workplace. How do we get along with each other? I just recently started doing a training on intergenerational work in the workplace. I'm really excited about. So I do speeches and I do training. I love doing both of them, right? I've done a lot of work now for the Florida Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And that was a series on diversity. And a lot of my diversity training really includes this kind of stuff, how do you become aware of your own biases? And so a lot of my work is how can you use meditation and yoga, walks in the park, all those kind of self-healing things to help you work well with other people. When you switch that thing, I'm like, where am I? Who am I talking to?
You see yourself?
Yeah, I see myself now. Right. So that's pretty much what I train, I motivate. Hopefully next year this time I'll be doing some one-on-one wellness coaching. That's where I'm trying to head. I'm writing. Hopefully I don't know if Teresa is online, but I'm actually trying to complete a book. Life is God, baby. That's where we're headed. So that's me. I train, I speak, I try to inspire. That's it.
And how can people get a hold of you? People that want to either book you or get sessions with you or find your work.
Well, I do have a website, www.yolandaspeaks.com. I'm on Facebook at Yolanda Speaks. On Instagram, a lot of younger people like Instagram. My tag is a word with Yogi. My nickname is Yogi. Isn't that interesting? I didn't come up with that. My dad did that. A word with Yogi. And you can always call me. I like calls. 850-509-9832.
That was too fast. You're going to have to say that again.
850
okay.
509
okay.
9832.
Thank you. And Facebook is Yolanda Speaks.
Yolanda Speaks.
Fabulous.
And so a word with Yogi is one word.
Oh, okay. So it's a word.
With Yogi, yes.
Great, thank you. So Becky, do you have any last comments, or does anybody else have any last comments, questions?
Well, I was just, thank you. I was going to ask about contacting you, and you were so generous, Yolanda. Like, you gave us all these different ways to contact you. Thank you. And I guess that I would just underscore that for everyone on this call is like, look that up. Like, I see, and thank you, Zoe, put the website on. So those are ways that we can, keep connected.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just so much thanks. So much.
Yeah. Thank you. When we talked earlier, Becky, I told my friends, oh my God, I had a great conversation with this really great woman.
I know. Yeah. I will say that too. I thought, oh my goodness, that could even have been our podcast.
I know.
It was just a one-on-one planning call, but we were just going on and on.
I know, it was great. It's so great to see you.
Yes, thank you. So wonderful to see you and everybody else on this call. I know people have been a little quiet, which is also really thoughtful and so respectful and thoughtful on all of you. And also at the same time, I just honor all of you and just encourage you. Yeah, Yolanda speaks. Each one of you, we speak. Right?
And I want to thank you all so much. And so Alma says thank you all for sharing. This Zoom meeting was very much needed. And like someone mentioned it earlier, this is a good start. Absolutely. We fully intend to be, this to be the beginning of a conversation, an ongoing conversation. So to that end, so for those of you all that were not able to see our first podcast with Dr. Dayanara Marte, that is available. And this conversation will also be posted to my YouTube page and also WOCN's YouTube page. It will also be available on WOCN's Facebook page, so you'll be able to see that. Dayanara's article, which is #SayYourName, that will be coming out later this summer. Yolanda also has an article coming out late this summer. And then in the meantime, we have our wellness survey. So as of yesterday, survey, like yesterday morning, we were at 215 people. And then by yesterday afternoon, we were at like 218 within a matter of an hour or two. So I did want to just give just some preliminary data on the Healing and Wellness survey. So one of the things we found out from the survey is 16.45% of respondents have been in the field for 21 years or more. So there's lots of wealth of information of people that are taking the survey. And then we have 18.42% have only been in the field for 3 to 4 years. And 16% of people who have taken the survey are 25 to 30 years. So we have a very interesting sort of demographic of folks taking the survey who've been in the work for a long time, but we also have a large number of folks that are just coming into this work. And man, if I had been told these types of things when I came into the work, it would have been a whole different ballgame. So for those of you that are just getting into the work, please grab onto this self-care conversation. 42% of people said they wanted a place that they could call for healing wellness support. I thought that was
that is interesting.
Yeah, that has really risen as the survey has gone on. So the link for the survey is there in the chat. I encourage you all, if you have not taken the survey, to take it. If you know of women of color, of course the survey is open to everybody, but we really want to hear from women of color. So if you know women of color doing the work, any social justice work, please pass the survey on. And then in our last minute or so, I want to see if our CEO wanted to have a last word.
Oh, yes, I just,
you're on, I'm going to.
Yeah, so you need radical self-care so that you can be ready to bounce back when somebody comes and says, you want to say a few words? So I am just really grateful to be on with all of you. Sister Yolanda, thank you for everything, for all of your words of wisdom and your sharings. I know that it's always a pathway. It's always a process to share your experience, no matter what you're sharing and how you're doing it. So thank you. And no matter how long you've been doing it, right? But just thank you for bringing that, for bringing yourself to this table. Always mad respect and props to Becky and Zoe for holding this space, for being thoughtful about what conversations and what topics to focus on and who the people need to be, and truly blessed by that, and truly blessed by everyone, for Elise Moore Orby, who is our Senior Director of Programs, who's also on, and for all of our other listeners and folks who participated. Just thank you. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for choosing you today. I feel like we do our work better when we do that. And it took me many years to do that. And I am a very hard-headed person around self-care and so forth. And so I'm just feeling just really blessed to be here. And so I attend these not just to participate as a staff person, but to get what I can. And so for myself. And so I feel full today, and I feel filled with the information that's been offered. And I just thank you. I thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So our next call will be in the fall, and it will be September 25th. And there will be more information about that. But as I said earlier, there'll be a couple of articles that'll be coming out that you'll be privy to. And please go back, re-listen to this. It's going to be a recording, and pull out any gems that you may have missed the first time. And I wish you all happiness and wellness, and I'll talk with you soon.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.